always viewed my marriage to Arthur as a well-decorated waiting room. It was comfortable, climate-controlled, and entirely safe, but it was never supposed to be my final destination. I was a high-end luxury event planner, spending my days orchestrating $50,000 floral arrangements and managing the frantic egos of the city's elite. My life was loud, vibrant, and bursting with color. Arthur, on the other hand, was an actuary. He calculated risk for a living. His world was defined by spreadsheets, probability models, and a rigid adherence to routine. He wore the same gray suit every Tuesday, ate oatmeal for breakfast without fail, and liked to be in bed by 10. He was a good man, a reliable man, but standing next to him felt like watching paint dry on a masterpiece. I convinced myself that I deserved more. I convinced myself that my brilliance earned me a little grace, a little secret just for me. That secret's name was Julian. Julian was a freelance architectural photographer I had hired for a massive corporate gala I was designing. From the moment he walked into the venue, adjusting his vintage leather camera strap, he consumed all the oxygen in the room. He was chaotic, fiercely passionate, and completely unpredictable. Where Arthur saw the world in columns of black and white, Julian saw it in splashes of neon. He was 5 years younger than me, lived in a loft that was always a mess, and made me feel like I was the only woman on earth. Our affair started fast and burned hot. For 14 months, I lived a double life with the precision of a military general. I had strict rules. We only met on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when Arthur was locked in his quarterly review meetings. I never saved Julian's number in my phone. I memorized it. I paid for our hotel rooms in cash, and I never, under any circumstances, brought him into my social circle. I was the mastermind. I thought I was holding all the cards, manipulating 2 different men to give me the exact balance of stability and excitement I craved. I didn't realize that while I was busy playing the game, Arthur had already rewritten the rules. The beginning of my absolute ruin started around my and Arthur's 7th wedding anniversary. Arthur, in his typical, predictable fashion, suggested we go to the same steakhouse we went to every year, followed by a quiet weekend at home. I feigned a sigh of deep disappointment and told him I couldn't. "Arthur, I am so sorry," I said, putting a perfectly manicured hand on his shoulder as he sat at his laptop. "But the Valence wedding has been pushed up. They want a full weekend walkthrough at that luxury resort in the mountains. I'm going to have to be on site from Friday to Sunday. I'm devastated, honey. Can we celebrate on Monday?" Arthur didn't look up from his screen. He just adjusted his glasses and nodded. "The Valence wedding. Right. Well, work comes first, Chloe. You've always been so dedicated. I'll cancel the steakhouse. Have a safe drive up there." I felt a twinge of guilt, but it evaporated the second I walked out the door. There was no Valence wedding walkthrough. Instead, I drove 3 hours north to the Silver Pines Resort, a 5-star, ultra-exclusive mountain retreat. I had booked a luxury cabin with a private hot tub overlooking the valley. Julian was meeting me there. This was going to be our ultimate getaway, a celebration of us. When I arrived, Julian was already waiting in the lobby. He looked effortlessly handsome, pulling me into a deep kiss the second I walked through the sliding glass doors. "I can't believe you pulled this off," he whispered, his hands roaming down my back. "A whole weekend, just you and me." "I told you," I smiled, feeling that familiar rush of adrenaline and superiority. "I always get what I want." I walked up to the mahogany reception desk, pulling out my platinum business credit card, the one Arthur never looked at. "Checking in under Chloe Vance," I told the concierge, a polite young man in a crisp suit. The concierge tapped his keyboard, a slight frown creasing his forehead. Mrs. Vance, yes, but I see the reservation has already been handled." I blinked. "Handled? What do you mean?" "The cabin has been upgraded to the presidential lodge and the balance has been paid in full," he said with a bright, professional smile. "By your husband, Mr. Arthur Vance. He called yesterday to make sure everything was perfect for your anniversary weekend." A cold, heavy stone dropped into the pit of my stomach. The air in the lobby suddenly felt too thin to breathe. "Arthur, my husband called?" Yes, ma'am. The concierge continued, oblivious to my panic. He even prepaid for the tasting menu at our restaurant, The Summit, for tonight at 8 p.m. He said it was a surprise for you and your colleague. Julian stepped up beside me, wrapping an arm around my waist. Wow, your husband upgraded us? That's hilarious. He's funding our weekend. Julian laughed, thinking it was just a stroke of blind luck from a clueless husband. But I wasn't laughing. I knew Arthur. Arthur didn't do spontaneous. Arthur didn't do surprises unless he had calculated the exact outcome. My hands started to shake. Right, I managed to choke out. Thank you. We went to the presidential lodge. It was massive, dripping with luxury, but I felt like I had just walked into a very expensive cage. I immediately went to the bathroom and locked the door. I pulled out my phone and dialed Arthur. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Did he know? Was he just being nice? No, he specifically said colleague. He knew I wasn't alone. Chloe, come out here, Julian called from the living room. This view is insane. I splashed cold water on my face. Get a grip, I told myself in the mirror. He's an actuary. He probably just saw the charge pending on the shared business account and wanted to do something nice for your work trip. I clung to that lie because the alternative was too terrifying to face. I forced myself to play the part. We drank champagne in the hot tub. We made love in front of the roaring fireplace. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Arthur's blank, calculating expression. At 7:30 p.m., we got dressed for dinner at the Summit. I wore a stunning, backless black dress. Julian wore a sharp blazer. We looked like a power couple. We walked into the restaurant, a breathtaking glass-walled dining room perched on the edge of the mountain. The maitre d' greeted us immediately. Mrs. Vance, right this way. Your party is waiting. I froze. My party? It's just the two of us. No, ma'am, the maitre d' said, looking slightly confused. The gentleman who booked the table is already seated. He said to bring you right over. Julian squeezed my hand, grinning. Maybe he hired a photographer or something? Come on. Julian pulled me forward, and we followed the host through the maze of candlelit tables. As we approached a large circular booth tucked into a private alcove, the blood drained entirely from my face. My knees buckled so violently I had to grab the back of a chair to stay standing. Sitting at the center of the table, wearing his Tuesday gray suit, was Arthur. But he wasn't alone. Sitting next to him was a beautiful, petite woman with dark hair. I recognized her immediately from Julian's Instagram, buried deep in his tagged photos from years ago. It was Mia, Julian's long-term live-in girlfriend, the one he promised me he was breaking up with. Chloe, Julian, you're exactly on time, Arthur said. His voice was incredibly calm, devoid of any anger or malice. It was the voice he used when reading a quarterly earnings report. Please, sit. The sommelier is about to decant the Bordeaux. Julian let go of my hand as if it had caught fire. He stared at Mia, his jaw practically hitting the floor. Mia? What are you doing here? Mia didn't look angry. She looked utterly exhausted. She took a slow sip of her water and didn't make eye contact with him. Arthur invited me, Julian. He thought it was time we all had a little status meeting. I couldn't move. My brain was short-circuiting. Arthur stood up, pulled out the chair across from him, and gestured for me to sit. Chloe, take a seat. You're making a scene, and you know how much you hate ruining the ambiance of a nice venue. I slowly sank into the chair. Julian awkwardly slid into the seat next to me, leaving a massive gap between us. The silence at the table was suffocating. The waiter arrived, poured 4 glasses of expensive red wine, and disappeared as quickly as he could. Arthur picked up his glass, swirled it gently, and took a sip. Excellent vintage. I put it on your business card, Chloe. I hope you don't mind. Since you've been using it to fund Julian's life for the past 14 months, I figured one more bottle wouldn't hurt the bottom line. Arthur, I whispered, my voice trembling. Arthur, please. Can we just talk about this privately? We are talking, Chloe, Arthur said smoothly. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. He placed it in the center of the table. You see, I noticed some anomalies in our tax filings 3 months ago. You're a brilliant event planner, but your accounting is incredibly sloppy. Unexplained cash withdrawals, phantom hotel charges. So I did a little digging. Arthur opened the folder. Inside were perfectly organized, color-coded spreadsheets. He turned to Julian. Julian, you've had quite a lucrative year, Arthur said, looking at the young photographer with mild amusement. Based on my calculations, my wife has spent approximately $42,000 on you since last April. High-end dinners, luxury hotel stays, and most interestingly, a $14,000 wire transfer to your LLC, which you claimed was for consulting fees, but was actually used to pay off your personal credit card debt. Julian swallowed hard, looking desperately at Mia. Mia, baby, I can explain. Don't, Mia said, her voice sharp as glass. Just let him finish. Arthur turned a page in the folder. Now, Chloe, here is where the math gets fascinating. You thought you were the one pulling the strings. You thought you were keeping Julian all to yourself. But data doesn't lie, my dear. Arthur slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. It was a receipt from a boutique jeweler in the city, dated 3 weeks ago. Julian used the $14,000 you loaned him to buy a custom-cut 2-carat diamond engagement ring, Arthur said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And he didn't buy it for you. I stared at the receipt. The words blurred together. I looked at Julian. He was staring firmly at his lap, his face pale, sweating profusely. He proposed to Mia last weekend, Arthur continued, leaning back in his chair. A very romantic setup from what Mia tells me. Which is quite ironic, considering the ring on her finger was entirely funded by my wife's infidelity. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I had thrown away my marriage. I had risked everything. I had paid for his life. And he had used my money to build a future with the woman he swore he was leaving. I felt physically sick. The illusion of my control, of my brilliance, shattered into a million humiliating pieces. Arthur? I choked out, a tear finally escaping and ruining my mascara. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. Oh, I know you didn't, Arthur said, his tone shifting from clinical to a chilling blend of pity and disgust. That's the saddest part of all of this, Chloe. You thought you were the mastermind playing a brilliant game of chess, but you were just an ATM for a con artist. Arthur stood up and buttoned his suit jacket. He looked down at Julian. Julian, thank you, Arthur said. Julian looked up, bewildered. I spent 7 years trying to make her happy, trying to be enough. You managed to take the garbage out of my house and you didn't even charge me for it. You charged her. It was the best return on investment I've had all year. Arthur turned his gaze to me. There was no love left in his eyes. Nothing but cold, calculated finality. I've already filed the papers, Arthur said quietly. I moved your things into a storage unit this morning. The lease on our apartment is solely in my name and the locks have been changed. You have your business and you have your colleague. I suggest you figure out who is paying for the room tonight because I canceled your business card 3 hours ago. Arthur reached down, picked up Mia's hand and helped her stand up. Mia, my driver is waiting out front. Let's get you home. Mia stood, looked at Julian one last time, slipped the diamond ring off her finger and dropped it into his water glass. It sank to the bottom with a quiet clink. Without a word, she turned and walked away with my husband. I sat there, frozen in the dim light of the luxury restaurant I had thought was my victory lap. Julian ran his hands through his hair, cursing under his breath. He didn't look at me. He wasn't worried about losing me. He was panicking because he had just lost his fiancée and his meal ticket in one fell swoop. The waiter returned, looking incredibly uncomfortable. He placed a small leather booklet on the table between us. "Excuse me," the waiter murmured. "The gentleman who just left asked me to inform you that the tasting menu was not, in fact, prepaid. He just reserved the table." I stared at the leather booklet. Inside was a bill for $800. I looked at Julian. He patted his pockets, looking away from me. I don't have my wallet on me, Chloe." That was the moment the reality of my new life finally set in. There was no grand romance. There was no brilliant double life. There was only me, sitting in a cold mountain resort, utterly alone, entirely broke, and staring at the reflection of a fool in a glass of water.